What is up, guys? Phaedo82 coming at you with another edition of Rust Tactics. This is a series that takes a look at PvP skirmishes, group dynamics, and player tactics that are being used on vanilla Rust servers. This footage was from the US Rustopia server, but it should apply to any high population vanilla Rust server. And as always, what we mean when we say vanilla Rust is Rust as it's intended to be experienced at this point in time in its development. Could look different down the road, so keep that in mind, but it also means Rust without any additional modifications. So the group we were just watching was rolling out as night was setting in, and under the cover of night, they've arrived at the compound of YPB. They promptly took over and secured one of YPB's flank towers, which are towers that are used to go around the radius of your base to allow you to suppress raiders if they're coming in, and their defensive positions. The reasoning for taking over a flank tower could be twofold. One, it could be to grief YPB to be able to suppress them and keep them at bay. The other is that it could be used in preparation for a raid. I don't believe at this point in time that this group was intending to assault YPB's main compound or to raid it, because they would need a group honestly 4 times their size in order to be able to really do any damage to YPB's compound. YPB's holding strong here using their existing flank towers that aren't compromised and their main base, as well as some additional support fire that's coming in from a CML tower, which we can see here, that is far over on another mountain ridge. So that's also an important tactic, is build close to your allies. If you can position your bases that are going to be beneficial to both groups, that's going to be something that you really want to employ. As we take a look at the map here, the flank towers are indicated by the yellow numbers. We see CML's tower, YPB, and then where the attackers are holed up in the flank tower that's been compromised. So as we can see down here on the ground, YPB is not too concerned about breaching this flank tower. They haven't taken out their C4 or rockets, so they're not too concerned. They know they have the attackers locked down and held in that position from the vantage point of their existing flank towers that aren't compromised. So that is something that really goes to show how important those flank towers are going to be in your base design. We can see that YPB Tommy there just took somebody out from this flank tower, so they have it really locked down here. There's lots of ground fighting going on with nakeds. The attackers at this point in time have to make a decision. They have to assess where they're going with this. They can hold up in this tower and keep fighting, but eventually they're going to run out of supplies and run out of resources. The benefit of taking over a flank tower is also that the defenders of the base, YPB in this case, is going to have to use resources to be able to take that back over. That could mean just using pickaxes to get through the doors, or it could mean in worst case scenarios, situations where you have to use C4. The other added danger of having a flank tower taken over is that the attackers will gain some limited building privilege, so they'll be able to start building onto that flank tower, making it more massive and then making it more of a problem for YPB to get in there and neutralize that. So it's important, if a flank tower is compromised, or really any part of your base is compromised, to really get in there before the attackers can take a foothold and start honeycombing that tower and making it much more difficult to be able to get back under YPB's control. So you can see where YPB built here. It's in a very nice location. There's not a lot of foliage, there's not a lot of rocks around here, so that also makes those additional flank towers really all the more prominent in the landscape, and they can really see what's coming and what's going. And that is the biggest advantage to these towers, is that it gives you a perspective that you're not going to have otherwise if you just had, say, a main base. So the attackers are trying to make a run out the door here. I'm not sure if they're attempting to run away or just engage YPB on the ground. We can see here that one of the members is promptly taken out very quickly by a sniper who's on one of those existing flank towers. We'll go ahead and slow that down and take another look at that nice shot. He was already dead, but he took another one to the chest for good measure. And notice here, as the attackers are leaving that compromised flank tower, they're throwing down high exterior wooden walls. If you have high exterior wood or stone walls, you can use them for a tactical application, in that if you go ahead and throw them down, you'll have a place to be shielded from fire. In this case, they're shielded from the sniper fire. That's really important, and it will save your life. It's similar to the way we used to use the barricades in the old version of Rust Legacy if you were a Legacy player. Notice that YPB Pez is up here in one of the outermost flank towers, and this tower has different ports to shoot from. It has embrasures, which is going to protect Pez because it's more difficult for the attackers to land their shots up there, but it's also more difficult for Pez to really call out targets. But he also has an open doorway on that flank tower, which gives him more of a vantage point. So consider employing different options when you build those towers, and don't rely just on the embrasures. Again, we can see fire coming in here from that CML tower on the ridge that is a ways away there, and you can really get a perspective of that when you look at what the players are looking at from that flank tower. That tower you can barely see, let alone be able to call out the shots of the players who are going to be in that tower. So that type of distance Without the high velocity ammo and without the scopes, would be probably impossible to effectively land shots. But with those two things together, it's a very dangerous game, because that CML tower is actually locked down right on the front door of this compromised flank tower. So when you're looking at that footage and when you're looking at the map, just take a note how this flank tower was probably the worst one they could have taken over. They probably didn't realize that, but that CML tower is looking straight away at their front door. So as we go ahead and pan out here, we're going to take a look at some building that's going on by the attackers in that compromised tower. Because they have access to a tool cabinet in there, they have some limited building privilege, or really all the building privilege for that tower. And they're trying to extend the tower to be able to fortify it and get different positions here. But you can really see that how effective the flank towers are, because the minute they put up the twig structures, they're immediately taken out, whether it's by fire from CML's tower or from the flank towers by YPB. So that is the best sort of case in point that we can show you for the effectiveness of the flank towers. You know, it's something to see the players go down, but to see the twig give into different pieces there and explode the minute it's put up really shows you how dialed in on this tower YPB and CML are. So down on the ground here, we have Tommy and some other YPB members who are trying to lock it down here, and they're hoping to get a lucky shot. As the front doors open, the attackers are making another stand coming out here on the ground. But again, you can see that even with the high exterior walls, they're taking a lot of incoming sniper fire, and they have to actually go back into the base. So they're really holed up in the base that they've taken over at this point, that flank tower. And YPB is just holding their position strong here. And this is what you want to do, whether it's in a raid or just a smaller scale skirmish. If you're a defender, you really have the home field advantage, and you can defend against large waves of people with relatively low numbers if you have the proper base design. And flank towers are really important on the higher population servers. So as the attackers move out here, you guys are going to be watching some footage of them running, trying to get away with whatever supplies they have left in that flank tower. And as they go down, they really have to manage what bodies they're looting to make sure they get away with the bulk of their supplies. And as they respawn, they'll be respawning back to that flank tower, running out naked with just an AK, trying to keep in the fight. So as you guys watch this footage, just wanted to take a step back for a moment and talk about raiding a compound like this. So as you can see, YPB's compound is relatively massive here in terms of the scope of it. The main base itself is surrounded by a lot of high exterior stone walls, so that's going to be very difficult to breach, even if it didn't have any flank towers. Now, if I were going to raid this base, I would show up with a raid party that was substantially bigger than the one here. I know a lot of people will oftentimes see raiders being disproportionate to defenders, and it tends to get people a bit salty. They say it's a zerg, they say it's unfair. Now, certainly we never want to see, 20 people raiding a one-by-one base. That's, not good footage and really not good sportsmanship. But in terms of military doctrines and military strategy, if any of you guys have a background in that, it's pretty well known that you need more attackers versus defenders. So the ratio of attackers is always going to be higher to that of the defenders. So that's something why when you see a lot of attackers coming towards a base, it's simply necessary. Now again, keep in mind, this is vanilla Rust footage. This is 3 days after the start of a wipe cycle on a vanilla Rust server. So I wasn't able to put the footage together right away, but this was footage from 3 days after the start of a wipe cycle. So even in vanilla Rust, there's not increased gather rates like there are in modded servers, but players are able to get up bases very quickly in bases that are very well fortified. What that means for raiding is that raiding is more than ever a very resource-intensive process at this point. So if bases are to be raided, they require a lot of planning, a lot of scouting out of the locations, and then approach in a very systematic way. So if I were raiding this base, I would focus mainly on their towers at first, and I would try to take over each of their flank towers one by one. Once you have the flank towers in the YPB compound taken over, you can use those towers against them. And the flank towers are going to be much easier to take over than a main base. Typically, a flank tower is going to have one cabinet, potentially two cabinets, and relatively few doors. So it's not going to require a ton of resources to be able to go ahead and get into those towers. You might have to do it quickly if they're online, so you might have to expend C4 and rockets to get up into the towers quickly. But if you have a raid party set up where you have other, clans that are going to be coming in or backup forces that are ready to come in once those flank towers are taken over, that would be a great tactical application. In a situation like this, I would actually take out all of those raid towers and try to have groups focus on them all at once, take them over, and then just worry about suppressing YPB in their main base, then systematically taking over that main base. So in my mind, that's kind of how it would work. If you guys think differently, go ahead and let me know. Again, just keep in mind that this is not a modded server, there's not teleportation, players don't respawn with any kits, so vanilla is more hardcore and does require a more thoughtful approach in terms of raiding. Alright guys, as always, really hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Rust Tactics. Let me know if you like this series, if you want to see more of it, and let me know what you would have done in terms of the tactics used by the raiders or the defenders. The attackers did make their way home, but they better hope that YPB didn't follow them back to their compound. As always guys, Phaedo 82, peace.